Tonight, Donald Trump returns to the White House.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President and Donald, congratulations.
All eyes were on the President-elect and President Biden as they held talks over the transfer of power. Elon Musk gets his way with a job in the cabinet. We'll look at his plans to reshape government. Also tonight. Meet the drone hunters. In the dead of night, our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, joins Ukrainian soldiers protecting the skies.
They don't want people to see that they've been firing from here. They don't want their positions to be known by anyone who's potentially spying.
As day breaks, we hear fears Ukraine's military is being abandoned ahead of that second Trump presidency.
A lack of artillery, we have a lack of infantry, and as a world don't care.
Also tonight, Gaza in peril. We speak to the Israeli MP kicked out of the Knesset for accusing his own government of genocide. And why Donald Trump's victory could spell trouble for the UK's deal over the Chagos Islands. That's all coming up on The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Good evening. It is a long-standing tradition in American politics. The serving president invites the person elected to replace them for talks at the White House. It's all about laying the ground for a peaceful transfer of power, no matter how reluctant the incumbent might be to leave office. It has to be said, Donald Trump didn't afford that courtesy to his successor in 2020. But today, it was Joe Biden's turn. Welcome back was his message to Donald Trump as the pair shook hands in front of a log fire. It was a photo op to project warmth, unity and a sense of calm. But the truth is, there's fear and confusion in Washington over what a second Trump presidency could bring. As expected, Elon Musk has been appointed to Trump's cabinet in a government cost-cutting role that's cast doubt over the futures of federal employees. And in another move that's raised eyebrows in Washington, Trump nominated a TV host as the country's defense secretary. Pete Hegseth served in Afghanistan and Iraq, but has no policy experience. Many are asking if this is the right man to have control of the largest military in the world. And as you'll hear later in the programme, his appointment could spell trouble for the UK. It is a high-stakes move from a president who's promised to shake things up. The question is, what else Donald Trump sees as fuel to throw on that White House fire? Our US correspondent Mark Stone has our first report.
Touching down at the presidential airbase and past the presidential planes that will soon be his again. It was back to the future for the comeback president. Surely for him, this moment is a neat two fingers for the many who said he never would. He never could, but he did. Now, with a victory that has secured him all three branches of government, the House, the Senate, and the place he will soon move back to. In anticipation of this moment of transition, this moment in history, the cameras of the world were here.
Well, Mr. President.
And for all that anticipation, what would it be like?
Donald, congratulations. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need.
Well, in the end, it was, of course, cordial.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Joe.
President Biden surely wanting to give Donald Trump what he never offered 4 years ago, a concession of defeat and a transition. And so two men who have such starkly different visions, two men who have exchanged such brutal words for each other over many years, a danger to democracy, Biden said of Trump so many times. Well, now it is the process of democracy that demanded this moment, a handshake and civility. It was the outgoing press secretary left to describe the details of the 2-hour meeting.
It was indeed very cordial, very gracious, and substantive. And I mentioned at the top, national security was discussed, domestic policy issues were discussed.
The 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Before the White House, President-elect Trump's first stop was Capitol Hill to congratulate Republican politicians who now hold the majority in both houses of Congress.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very nice gathering. Isn't it nice to win? It's nice to win.
And behind all this, his cabinet nominations keep coming.
I'm Pete Hegseth.
This is the man he wants to be his defense secretary. Fox News host, former National Guard Major Pete Hegseth. His name raised eyebrows, of course, but then that is precisely Trump's intention. And his views on the military, on China, a hint of the direction of travel may be.
We're always a decade behind in fighting the last war, whereas China's building an army specifically dedicated to defeating the United States of America.
The image for the ages, released tonight by the White House. It is almost as if the last few years never happened. A reset or a pause for posterity before the new world begins. Mark Stone, Sky News at the White House.
Well, let's take a closer look now at who Donald Trump has brought in as part of his cabinet. Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and the social media platform X, will provide advice on how to improve government efficiency. He'll be working alongside the former candidate Vivek Ramaswamy in the new joint role to cut regulation and restructure federal agencies. The Fox News presenter and military veteran Pete Hegseth has been picked as Defence Secretary. Well, our US correspondent James Matthews joins me now. And James, let's first talk about Elon Musk. His appointment will make the most headlines, we think. How disruptive could he be, potentially?
Potentially very much so, Gillian, I think. It's been quite the day in Washington. Donald Trump, as you heard in Mark's report, giving the warm afterglow report from that meeting with Joe Biden, history written by the winners, and Trump talking up the connection that they felt for at least a period inside the White House, despite what must have been an icy chill beneath the surface. In the past couple of hours, Trump has given an interview by phone to the New York Post, and again, warm words for his old foe, talking about how they both really enjoyed seeing each other. Trump saying, we had a really good meeting, got to know each other again. He says they spoke about conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine and compared their contrasting views on a way forward. I wanted to know his views, said Trump. He gave them to me. He was very gracious. But as you say, Gillian, by Trump's side today in Washington, as he has been since the election in Mar-a-Lago, was Elon Musk, a billionaire further empowered by the company he currently keeps. And there are questions about the influence he has. To what extent does the payback extend where Elon Musk is concerned? And there are questions, and there is discomfort, I can tell you, in Mar-a-Lago at the fact that he is there and has been there 24/7. The picture emerging of the Trump presidency has Elon Musk center frame. On the Washington trip, the big donor wasn't missing the big day out. The businessman by Trump's side has acquired the consultancy of crafting and administration. Having poured millions into the Trump campaign, payback has come in a department called DOGE. Officially, the Department of Government Efficiency, it will operate alongside government, targeting its institutions like the Department of Education. Musk is tasked with dismantling bureaucracy, regulations, and with reducing waste. Ironically, it's the anti-excess agency with not one but two heads. Vivek Ramaswamy, one-time contender for presidential nominee, will be Musk's partner. Elon Musk has been short on answers in the past. His appointment raises questions of who he's answerable to. He is the outside contractor inside government with the power to regulate the regulators.
Well, it's certainly worth looking at whether any of these individuals have ulterior motives for what they're pursuing. And certainly in the case of Elon Musk, that is true. You know, his many businesses are going to be affected by the regulatory environment of the U.S. Typically, federal employees have to disclose their assets and any personal financial ties to prevent conflicts of interest. However, since Musk would not serve as an official government employee, he would be exempt from those requirements, which I think is very notable.
Simon Balmain worked for Twitter when Elon Musk bought the company and cut 80% of the workforce.
I think very much what we saw at Twitter was the scorched earth policy of trying to get to this desired outcome and hoping that it all works out well, and not really worrying about the individual level of what's happening, or even a lot of the business understanding that was required. And we saw this with people that were actually laid off that were then considered to be critical to the organization, and they were begged to come back.
In his Washington meeting with House Republicans, Donald Trump joked that Elon Musk wouldn't go home. "I can't get rid of him," he said. House Democrats were non-committal on the question of outside influence. It's not a concern.
I did not say that. I said that my focus is on...
Is that a concern?
My focus is on Americans right now and making sure that we have an economy that works for them.
Sky News has learned that prior to the Washington trip, Musk's near-constant presence at Trump's Florida base has begun to wear on those in the inner circle. Sources have told us that they see Elon Musk as overstepping his role in the government's transition. One said he's behaving as if he's a co-president and making sure everyone knows it. And he's sure taking lots of credit for the president's victory. How far the credit extends is the concern. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
So that's the impact Musk could have. How about Trump's suggestion for Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth? Well, Hegseth is a former Army National Guard serving tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He began working for Fox News as a contributor in 2014 and is now co-host of a weekend programme. He successfully lobbied Donald Trump during his first term to release military service members accused of war crimes. Mr. Hegseth has since said so-called woke generals in the Pentagon needed to be fired and says women shouldn't be in combat roles. Let's bring James back in. And James, this appointment, a sign of how far Donald Trump is going to shake things up. But how has this particular appointment been received?
With eyes being raised and jaws dropping the floor, dropping to the floor. Frankly, Gillian, a big surprise. I mean, this Pete Hegseth, he is a Trump loyalist, no question. We've seen that actually in his role as TV anchor. He is a TV news anchorman, square-jawed, straight out of central casting. He's conducted several interviews with Donald Trump. I might say they're not the toughest probings that he will ever have experience. So I think he's very much a loyalist and has been chosen as such. In terms of what he can bring to that particular job, it's something of a mystery in terms of what he will do, how he will manage, and what that means for how the US military engages on a worldwide scale. Members of the US military that I speak to here, they have concerns that, you know, he's dealing with the biggest military in the world, something that involves a challenging job of management, certainly, in terms of the personnel and the policy moving forward, and experience, engagement with armies around the world, so that, you know, America presents the best of itself in the theatres of war around the world, built on relationships that he has not built in his role as a TV anchor. And one imagines that will cause concern in a number of dark corners of the world, particularly in Kyiv. He's not the only controversial appointment, I can tell you, is Pete Hegseth, because Matt Gaetz, firebrand, junior political player from Florida, a member of the House, he within the past hour has been picked by Donald Trump as Attorney General. He's got the top legal job. Now, this is an individual who is already facing an ethics investigation, was investigated by the Department of Justice, although no charges were brought, on allegations of sex trafficking and a sexual relationship with a minor, so controversial within himself. But in terms of his role, his job, what Trump will want from him, clearly his loyalty, job number one will be to make the criminal charges against Donald Trump himself go away. And there's also the matter of retribution, long talked about by Trump, against the people who have prosecuted him and potentially against Joe Biden. So that remains an open question. But there is no question that Donald Trump right now is shaping this presidency very much around himself and his loyalists.
James, thank you very much. Well, in the last few minutes, Trump's nomination for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has been questioned by the press.
It's an honor to the President would place his confidence in me in a position of such importance. It's also a tremendous responsibility, and the job of the Secretary of State is to execute on the foreign policy set by the elected President of the United States, and I hope to have the opportunity to do it if my current colleagues here in the U.S. Senate confirm me. So,
Senator Matt Gaetz was also nominated to be the Attorney General of the United States. Would you support that nomination?
well, I'll be involved in my own. I know Matt for a long time. At one point, years ago, when I was in the state legislature, he actually worked for me, and I was aspiring to be Speaker of the House. So I've known him for a long time. And again, I think the President is entitled to his team, and he's made his appointments. And I like Matt a lot. I know him very well, and I'm confident that if the Senate confirms him, he would do a good job. And again, presidents are entitled to have the people that they want in these key positions to carry out the mandate that's been delivered to him by the voters of the United States.
Do you think Gaetz is confirmable, though?
There was a tweet today saying that does Italy is a democracy, or does an elected official take the decision? This tweet was from an elected official take the decision, referring this to the judiciary, the Italian judiciary system that block an immigration law. This tweet was from Elon Musk. So
I can't comment. I haven't seen it. I don't know what he's referring to. And while I know the importance of our alliance with Italy and how important they've been, I most certainly wouldn't say I'm in a position right now to be an expert on their judicial system. So you'll have to ask whoever it is that posted that.
Do you think Gaetz can be confirmed?
Again, I think most of my colleagues understand that presidents deserve great deference in appointing people to key positions in government to serve in their cabinet, and that's how I expect they'll continue. But obviously, I'm not sure if I'll even be here for that vote. So, okay, thank you.
What about Tulsi Gabbard?
A very sober Marco Rubio there confirming his nomination as Secretary of State. Well, Trump's return to the White House has raised concerns about future support for Ukraine. Our team on the ground has heard from soldiers who feel like they're being abandoned by the international community, and their job repelling Russian attacks is getting harder. Russia has dramatically scaled up its long-range drone attacks on Ukraine in an effort to grind down the country's air defences. Data from ACLED shows that the number of attacks using Shahed drones supplied to Russia by Iran have surged in recent weeks. Well, this map shows the scale of the attacks since October the 1st, with the highest number of attacks on the capital, Kyiv, but reaching as far as Odessa. And the use of drones is escalating. Since the start of November, Ukraine has reported 1,105 Russian drones entering its territory, a daily average of 85 drones. That's compared to just 11 per day back in June. It appears to be having an effect on Ukraine's air defences. Before October, Ukraine managed to shoot down at least 77% of Russian drones each month. Well, that interception rate has now dropped to just 56%. In the Sumy region, anti-drone units are trying to shoot Iranian drones out of the sky with limited resources. Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has spent time with the soldiers there and sent this report. A warning that it does contain some flashing images.
Every night, the tarpaulin covers are pulled off Soviet-era anti-aircraft guns and prepped for action. On battered trucks, they rumble into the night to take up defensive positions. The Russian drone attacks on Ukraine's cities and power plants are constant, and these old guns are the country's main defense against drones. The soldiers can track the drones, many supplied to Russia by Iran, on handheld tablets. This is modern warfare colliding with old-fashioned technology. They wait and listen and watch. In fields all around us, other units join the attack. In truth, only about 30% of the drones and missiles in this sector are actually shot down. So the soldiers are picking up the shells that have been fired from the weapons at the passing missile. The reason for that is they don't want people to see that they've been firing from here. They don't want their positions to be known by anyone who's potentially spying on them for the Russians. So they're going around trying to find the spent shells, and then they'll move and all trace of them will be gone. Captain Sergei of the 117th Brigade is in charge of 160 men in 8 mobile units protecting the southern sector of the city of Sumy in northeastern Ukraine, near the Russian border. Air raid sirens blare as he monitors the drones, and they're coming. We speed after him through checkpoints and along darkened roads. The drone is above us.
Lights off! Lights off! I'm gonna come on. Drop the light.
You can still hear the drone in the sky. They're trying to find it with searchlights. But another has got through.
We need a stronger, more automated air defense system that operates independently of human involvement.
It is absolutely relentless. An Iranian Shahid drone is flying over. They're tracking its flight, and they attack. These Ukrainian defenders, hundreds of them, will man the guns for another freezing night. The last line of defense. It's not good, but it's better than nothing. The Ukrainian military's dependence on foreign weaponry, particularly American, can't be underestimated. Hidden in a forest, they're repairing an American Bradley fighting vehicle. They haven't got enough of anything already. If Donald Trump cuts the supply, the Ukrainians will lose. It's that simple. Sasha Shershin is one of Ukraine's top field commanders. He's 30 years old. His 47th Battalion is fighting in the Russian territory of Kursk. Ukraine invaded in the summer. He's gloomy about his country's prospects, but he and his men will fight to the last.
I mean that situation is we have a lack of weapon, we have a lack of artillery, we have a lack of infantry, and as a world don't care about the justice, you know, and they don't want to finish the war by our winning, you know. They're afraid Russia. I'm sorry, but they scare it. They scare it, and it's not the right way.
Along this 1,000-kilometre front line, there is a continuous movement of military vehicles going forward and ambulances coming back. Far behind the lines, miles inside Ukraine, new defensive positions are being built. An indicator, perhaps, of how this country is beginning to think.
And Stuart Ramsey joins us now from eastern Ukraine. Stuart, we're talking a lot tonight about a looming Trump presidency and the peril that might place Ukraine in. How worried are troops that you've spoken to?
Well, it's very interesting, actually, because almost all of them said that although there's lots of discussion about what might or might not happen in the future under the next presidency, almost all of them said, well, that is just talk at the moment. The war is ongoing. We are still fighting. We have got a job to do. And you might think there's a lot of the problems that they have, you would think that morale was really low. But actually, amongst those who are fighting, that's not the issue, really. They're gloomy about future prospects, but they are defending the nation. And nothing has changed in that whatsoever. I think what many have talked about here, and much discussion, is would it have been better for the country if Biden administration had then a Harris administration had carried on? That was the sort of general view that would be the best. But others here are saying, well, maybe not. Maybe Trump is going to take a much stronger line against Russia than perhaps was expected, and that it might be good for Ukraine. So the people, the soldiers, the ordinary people are talking about this all the time. But it is, I suppose, decidedly upsetting for people because they just don't know what's going to happen next. They don't know what Trump is going to do, don't know what sort of negotiations are going to take place, both with Russia and, of course, with Ukraine and its government as well. So there's so many unanswered questions. But again, I go back to that point from the military, is they've still got a job to do. Nothing has changed whatsoever.
And Stuart, there have been reports of Russia assembling tens of thousands of troops around the Kursk region. How much pressure are the Ukrainians under right now?
Well, I think they're going to be under a lot of pressure. Yeah, 50,000 soldiers, it's reported, 10 or 11,000 North Korean. Kursk, of course, is in Russia. The Ukrainians went across the border in the midsummer. They are under pressure. And I'll tell you one of the reasons, they don't have enough of everything. But one of the really critical weaknesses they have is they just don't have enough infantry, and it's difficult to see where they're going to get any more from. I think that's going to be critical, not just in this particular sphere of the operation, but the whole of that 1,000-kilometre front line has got pressure on the Ukrainians by the Russians because they just got so many more men that are available to them, and the Ukrainians have a finite number and they are running out of them. And of all the things that the soldiers have been talking about for the last few days, that one came up time and time again. We just don't have enough infantry. We need better weapons. We need more weapons. We need to be able to fire into Russia. They come up, but we need infantry, and that's something that can't probably be provided for them.
Stuart, thank you. Stuart Ramsey in eastern Ukraine there for us. You're watching The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Still to come. What can we expect from Donald Trump's controversial pick for Defence Secretary? We'll hear from someone who's worked in the Pentagon.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Connor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Connor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News. The full story first.
conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. The eyes of the world are now on Washington, D.C. as Donald Trump makes the key appointments for his administration and how it could impact America's relations with the rest of the world. Key amongst them, a Fox News TV host as Defence Secretary. How is Pete Hegseth's promotion being received by those in the defence community? We're joined now by Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for European and NATO policy at the Pentagon. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, your thoughts on the appointment for Defence Secretary?
Well, it's obvious that whether it's the Defense Secretary or it's the Attorney General, expertise, knowledge, experience is not the top priority in making these appointments. It's loyalty to Donald Trump. This is no surprise. Everyone understood that that was where he was going in terms of his appointments. But it is stunning, some of the backgrounds of his appointees that are totally not appropriate for these jobs. So the Washington right now, every head is spinning.
But Pete Hegseth does have a military background, though, doesn't he?
Well, he was a captain in the Army. He has 2 Bronze Stars. But that doesn't mean that he's able to run the Department of Defense, with a couple of million people, uniformed and civilians, under his leadership and a range of problems. If he were to be appointed the Secretary of the Army, that's one thing. But this is something that's much bigger. And being a captain in the Army doesn't necessarily give you immediately the experience and the gravitas to handle a job like this. So I think that's a problem in some of these appointments. Just a little bit of military experience seems to be going a long way in the minds of the Trump administration. And that's just not the way you look on being able to manage something as big and sprawling as DOD.
Donald Trump said in his official statement he's an Army combat veteran who did tours in Guantanamo Bay, Iraq and Afghanistan. For his actions in the battlefield, he was decorated with 2 Bronze Stars as well as a combat infantryman's badge. He has spent his entire life as a warrior for the troops and for the country. With Pete at the helm, America's enemies are on notice. Our military will be great again and America will never back down.
Well, I hope so. I hope that's what comes about. But there's nothing in his background to make me think that he can handle the huge budget problems that come with being in DOD, that can handle the nuclear strategy part of what the Pentagon is going to have to keep in mind as it deals with China, increasing its strategic nuclear capability, dealing with Russia that rattles its nuclear saber. I'm not sure being a captain and being posted to Guantanamo Bay gives him a lot of insight into handling things like that. Chemical warfare, the morale of 2 million people, civilian and military, managing all of that. There's a lot that comes with this job. And past secretaries of defense have needed to be more than just a few years in the military to be able to handle the kind of load and stress that comes with being a Secretary of Defense.
What sort of backgrounds have the past Secretary of Defense come from? I mean, what are the qualities that you think they've shown in the past, the best that you've seen in your time?
Well, one of the best that I've seen, Dr. Bill Perry, in the 1990s, was a scientist, a mathematician. He was an academic. He had worked in the Pentagon for years in the engineering side of developing stealth technology and that type of thing. He was a very good manager, proven manager. He did a great job. Ash Carter, who just passed away, Secretary of Defense, was well known in the scientific community in terms of things like AI and in terms of dealing with high tech that was becoming really evident on the scene back in 2016, 2015, when he was the Secretary of Defense. For years, he had dealt in Washington with high tech in terms of the defense. He had been the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He had had a number of high-level positions within the defense community in Washington. That's a second example. Many secretaries of defense had been on the Hill. They had been senators. They had been on the armed services committees. They had brought with them a not just a little bit of experience, but years of experience to come in and to try to handle a very large military and a very large civilian staff that need very strong leadership.
Jim Townsend, just we're running out of time. In just one word, do you think this will get through the Senate, yes or no?
It will sail right through.
Okay. Thank you very much for that concise answer. Thank you. Jim Townsend there. This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Next up, the United Nations top humanitarian official says acts reminiscent of the gravest international crimes are being committed in Gaza.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Let's turn to Gaza now, where at least 14 people have been killed in Israeli military strikes as the IDF deepened their offensive into the town of Beit Hanun in the north. Elsewhere, footage has emerged today of a strike in Al-Muwasi, west of the city of Khan Yunis. It's not clear if there were any casualties as a result of this strike. Well, it comes as the United Nations top humanitarian official claimed acts reminiscent of the gravest international crimes are being committed in Gaza, with Palestinians facing potential famine. Here's Acting Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Joyce Msuya.
Essential commercial goods and services, including electricity, have been all but cut off. This has led to increasing hunger, starvation, and now, as we have heard, potentially famine. We are witnessing acts reminiscent of the gravest international crimes.
Militant group Palestinian Islamic Jihad has released new video of an Israeli hostage inside Gaza. In the video, Sasha Trufanov calls on the Israeli government to secure the release of hostages. The circumstances around how the video was filmed are not known, but his family has given permission for the media to use the video.
אני מתגעגע למשפחה שלי, אני מתגעגע לחברים שלי, אני מתגעגע לחיים שלי, אני מתגעגע לחופש שלי. אני מתגעגע לכל כך הרבה דברים. אני רוצה לחזור הביתה בריא ושלם.
Well, joining me now is Nivi Feldman, leader of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum UK. Thanks very much for coming in. What were your first thoughts when you saw that video newly released today?
It's really mixed emotions. It was his birthday 2 days ago, the second birthday of Sasha in captivity. So to see a sign of life after a year, that we know that some of the hostages have been killed by military attacks, some have been executed, murdered at gunpoint when, they felt like it or when they thought that the IDF is coming close. So to see a sign of life and seeing that he's saying that I'm a year in captivity, it's encouraging to see that there's some hostages that are still alive and we must bring them home, we must get Hamas to release them. It's been too long. I think after a year in captivity, they're all, never mind if they were men, young, old, babies, women, they're all in starvation. He says there's no food every day, there's no water every day. They have no sanitary things. He has a skin condition he developed in captivity.
While he was,
he said there's no more soap. There's no, they don't have the basic of things.
And quite telling, I thought, that in the video, I think he was asked his age and he said 28. He's actually 29 now. He doesn't even know the passing of time, that he's had a birthday a couple of days prior.
Yeah, so he was kidnapped 7th of October. At gunpoint, he went with his spouse for the holiday to his family. His father was murdered. I don't think Sasha knows that his dad was murdered. He was kidnapped with his mom and grandmother and spouse, and they were all separated. So the last time his girlfriend saw him was at gunpoint. And then 11th of November, it was his first birthday, 28, in captivity. 2 days ago, it was his 29th birthday. Yesterday, his girlfriend was in an event in Jerusalem, 2,000 women, and she said, I'm praying to see a sign of life from him. And this morning we woke up and to a sign of life, which is encouraging.
And he's saying that the quote I think he was saying is that he's demanding the government reach a deal for their release, and there are voices coming out of Israel, some from family of hostage members, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu, his priority is not the hostages, his priority is to annihilate Hamas. So those priorities need to be changed, and not enough is being done to release the hostages.
I think we can agree that every time that they're about to reach a deal, one of the sides rejects it. And the last few times that there were offers on the table, it was Hamas, the terrorist organization that went into Israel 7th of October, unprovoked, murdered over 1,000 people, kidnapped over 240 people. They can release them at any point. I don't know if you remember, but after about 14 days, they just released the first 2 hostages. And after 17 days, they released 2 other hostages for humanitarian causes. They don't need a deal to release hostages. It's their choice to hold them. And I'm asking our MPs and our Prime Minister, bring them home. We have Emily Damari. She is a UK citizen. I don't think many of us here in England realize there are UK citizens in there. There were 2. One was murdered, Nadav Popplewell, and brought back. There's still 3 other close relation hostages. People like Oded Lifshitz, his daughter lives in Walthamstow Central in London. We have Elian Yossi Sharabi. He was married to Lian Sharabi, who's from Wales, and she and both of their daughters were murdered. There's Avinatan Or. There's so many hostages with UK relations, and our government has the responsibility to them to make sure all sides do whatever they can to bring them home. A year is too long.
Is the Israeli government doing enough, though?
I think if everyone were doing enough, they would be home by now.
What do you specifically want to see happen now?
Phil, the last year, we started talking about hostages, and then very quickly it went into the war fronts, whether it's in Gaza or in Lebanon or Iran, and people are forgetting them. I'm asking, the MPs, our MPs or our citizens, write to your MP, say after 101 days, is a 1-year-old baby going to make it? Is a 5-year-old toddler going to make it? Why are they there? And tell them, join the twinning campaign. Just talk, learn the story, speak with one hostage family, know their stories, and talk. Don't forget them.
Nivi, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. Thank you. An Israeli MP has been suspended from the Knesset for criticising his government's actions during the war. The far-left politician, Ofer Cassif, told me about his anger towards Israel's leaders.
I seek justice for everybody. And in our region, that means justice for both Palestinians and Israelis. And first and foremost, this justice amounts to ending the continuous genocidal massacre that goes on in Gaza. And eventually, in the long run, unfortunately, I wish I could say it was in the short run, but in the long run, that means the liberation of the Palestinian people from the vicious, lethal, murderous occupation and establishing its own independent state alongside the state of Israel. I think that this is also the interest of the Israelis and the Israeli society. In that sense, I truly believe that my struggle, including the prices I've been paying for, is the best thing for both peoples.
So you've been suspended from the Knesset for 6 months over statements that you've made. I just want to remind our viewers, or tell our viewers, what you actually said. You said, such is the state of the so-called democracy in Israel, that those who chant their support for genocide and celebrate the killing of innocents are considered heroes, while those who fight for justice and peace are persecuted as traitors. Who supports genocide and the killing of innocents?
Well, unfortunately, we can see that since the terrible criminal massacre committed by Hamas that my comrades and I were totally condemned, of course, last year on the 7th of October, in which, by the way, I personally lost dear friends, ever since Israel began or launched not a war, but an attack, a vicious attack on the Palestinian people in Gaza, not on Hamas. This is a massacre, this is a genocide. Given the destruction, the banning of or not allowing humanitarian aid to get in, starvation, lack of water and medicine, the total destruction of hospitals, of buildings, of civic neighborhoods altogether. This is, according to the acceptable definition, a genocide. And unfortunately, many people in Israel, of course, not everybody, the Israeli society is very polarized. There are millions who are against those atrocities, but still the government and a great deal of the so-called opposition in the parliament, at the Knesset, support it. But if one hand commits the crimes, the other hand is put on our mouth in order to hide it and to prevent us from speaking up against those atrocities.
What reason have you been given for your suspension, and why do you think it's unfair?
Unfair is an understatement, of course, but look, we are dealing with a prime minister that is suspect in so many crimes, not only crimes of war, but also corruption. So who's exactly caused the damage to the image of Israel and the Knesset?
Well, in response, the Knesset Ethics Committee said of Mr. Cassif's suspension that it doesn't tolerate encouraging bloodshed against IDF soldiers and the State of Israel, while undermining the state's ability to deal with legal challenges abroad. Now, tomorrow, Yalda Hakim will bring you a special programme on the conflict. Our Gaza investigation looks into the deaths of civilians in the enclave and reports on the human rights violations. Yalda will be in Doha, Qatar, which has played a mediator role in ceasefire talks. Join us live at 9 o'clock tomorrow for that. When the UK announced last month that it was to relinquish sovereignty over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, it's fair to say there was a limited backlash. They argued it saved a UK-US military base on Diego Garcia, and the White House said it approved of the deal. But the mood music is changing. Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the move would boost China and threaten US national security. Today, Nigel Farage, of course a friend of Donald Trump, hinted to the Commons that the decision may lead to friction with the new US Defence Secretary.
I can assure you, having been in America last week, knowing also the incoming Defence Secretary very well, there is outright hostility to this deal. Whatever is said about a lease agreement, as we saw with Hong Kong, these agreements can very, very easily be broken. Diego Garcia was described to me by a senior Trump advisor as the most important island on the planet.
I note the comments he makes regarding the incoming US administration. We're looking very forward to working with them, and I'm sure that they will be being briefed on the full detail of this deal. And I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that the details of this arrangement will allay any concerns.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here now. So, John, what does this all mean? Is there a looming bust-up, a row between the US and UK government? Could we see a possible U-turn?
Potentially, yes. That's what Nigel Farage claimed in the House of Commons today. There is some evidence for that. You mentioned Marco Rubio's comments a month or so ago during the American election campaign. Also, it's been reported that Trump lawyers are getting advice from the Pentagon on possibly overturning or vetoing this deal. Now, in the House of Commons today, Stephen Doughty, he's the Minister of State at the Foreign Office, stressing, as David Lammy has done already, this is 2 years in the making, this deal, under 3 Tory Prime Ministers. But the Tories now are with Mr Farage on this. They are saying it is a bad deal. So we got a new Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. She said during those exchanges in the Commons it was the wrong decision, giving away a key strategic asset. And clearly there is opposition building in Parliament. Ian Duncan Smith, what we describe as a China hawk, said it's the wrong deal with the wrong people at the wrong time. He said that they should start again. So there is opposition from the Conservatives, and there is a real fear that the new American administration will veto this deal.
Interesting. A U-turn might be in the making. John, thanks very much for that. Well, that's all for tonight's programme. News at 10 is up next with Anna, with more on Donald Trump's return to the White House. Stay tuned.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.